The legislature ends in less than 2 weeks, and major gun control legislation is yet to be determined. We're talking with a gun rights advocate for all the latest right here on Nevada Politics Today. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Don Turner is president of the Nevada Firearms Coalition and has been following closely all the gun bills this session. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, the biggest gun bill still alive is AB 291, and it originally would have banned bump stocks and allowed local governments to impose new gun laws. Where does that bill stand now?
Well, it went through the Senate committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee. They made a minor amendment to it, and now it's at the Senate. But when they had it in front of the Senate, when they had it in front of the Assembly Judiciary Committee, they did a joint committee hearing. So that means only one committee hearing. Now it goes to Senate Judiciary Committee for a workshop, so no public input.
So what I want to talk about different parts of this bill. One part is the bump stock ban. Is it just a ban on bump stocks, or do you think that it would go further?
Well, that's the problem with it, is that it banned bump stocks, but then it banned any kind of trigger altering device. And it was so loosely worded that most of the competition firearms have aftermarket triggers put in them, not to increase their rate of fire, but just to make them smoother to shoot and more accurate. And by the way it was worded, anybody that even did any trigger modification could potentially fail, end up in a legal arrest or a seizure.
Did they fix that?
They changed some language in it, but we're still not happy with it. It's still too vague. And that's the problem with some of the laws they write. They don't understand firearms, so they write them so vague, it just opens possibility of all sorts of abuses.
You know, and another thing that the gun rights folks have been concerned about are the preemption laws, repealing the preemption, allowing the local governments to impose gun control laws beyond what's happening at the state level. There's been rumblings that part is coming out of the bill. What do you know?
Well, in 1948, they passed a law, Clark County did, that allowed gun registration. It got so bad, in 1989, the state said, no, we're going to have one set of gun laws, but they allowed some to stay in place. So from 89 until 2015, it took a while to get true state preemption. And now they want to do away with all that and give all the counties the authority to make gun laws. And in the law, it says more restrictive than state law. So we're protesting that, obviously, and we have a big following of gun rights activists and just regular people that are upset about the way they do things. So the last public relations piece that came out on Friday, which wasn't official, said, oh, forgive us, we're going to take preemption out, we're sorry, but we're going to add in red flag laws, which that bill got a hearing and never got out of the process on time.
So I want to explain red flag laws for people who don't know. Basically, if there's a concern that someone with a firearm could be dangerous, it allows a court to go in and take their firearms.
You know, our system of justice is you're guilty until you're proven innocent. The way some of the red flag laws are written, and this one true, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. So a neighbor or somebody can call and complain that you're mentally unstable and you have guns, and the court will order the confiscation of your firearms, which means physically breaking into your house and seizing your guns. Then you have to go to court and prove that you're not a danger to get your firearms back. So it's reversed. So our concern about the red flag laws is due process.
Do you think that law would be constitutional?
It may not be, but how many people have to suffer before it gets all the way to the Supreme Court?
Is there any version of that would be acceptable? Maybe where someone could raise a concern, but the court has to prove that someone's a danger?
There are some laws like that. That if a complaint is filed, the court orders a order that the person has to voluntarily or under court order give up their guns, but they can give them to a neighbor, they can give them to a relative, and then they go in front of the court and have a hearing, and then the court decides whether they're mentally competent or not. That's a lot different than the court saying go take their guns and executing a search warrant and forcibly taking them away.
Would you support that first version of the law if it was the one coming forward?
It's hard to say we'd support it or not until we see the language.
And I also want to ask about the bump stock bill. I know you have concerns about it going far beyond bump stocks.
Right.
But if it was just a clean bump stock ban, would you support that?
I think it's superfluous because the federal government has already banned them.
Well, but the federal government can change. It establishes it in Nevada law.
So can the state.
Well, did you support the federal ban?
You know, I think it is a cosmetic reaction to something that wasn't an issue. And so one of the problems we have is the multiplication of laws that are just being stacked on people, and the bottom purpose of those laws is to make it a harassment to be able to own and use a firearm. As far as a bump stock per se, they're a device. They're just a device that uses the action of the gun. They can be replicated with other things. And of interest is the Obama administration is the one whose administration said, oh, this is okay. It's not a violation of the National Firearms Act. So we go all the way back to Obama for approving them.
You know, and another law that was added was the universal background check bill that Democrats passed earlier this session. After that, several rural counties said basically they weren't going to enforce the law. Do you support them in that effort?
Yes. And the reason why is they didn't just say they weren't going to support the background check. They said they were going to not support any non-constitutional law that was passed. And when you read the Nevada statute, every legislature and public official takes a law to uphold the Constitution of Nevada and of the United States. And they're saying basically is be careful. Don't pass any bills that are in violation of the Constitution because it's in violation of our oath of office, and we will not enforce them.
So do you think this was an unconstitutional law?
It could very well be.
Are you guys going to sue?
We don't know yet. We have to see what happens with AB 291.
And what would the grounds be for a lawsuit on this?
On the background check?
On the background checks.
I'm not sure. I'm not one of the big advocates for running out saying let's do a lawsuit for something until we see how it's implemented. But it does reach down into private transfers, and I'm not sure how they can do that because we could just drive to Arizona and do it and come back and we wouldn't be in violation of Nevada law.
You know, October 1 obviously was a great tragedy. Gun control groups say that the way to prevent that is to impose gun control. Obviously, you know, folks like yourself and those you represent oppose that.
Well, actually, I agree with that. And the reason I agree with it is if the casino had allowed their security guards to be armed, and if the casino hadn't made it a gun-free zone, he may have been stopped a lot earlier. So that is a type of gun control, is to do away with gun-free zones, or to have a better security system when somebody brings in pallets and pallets of things that's brought to somebody's attention and that they have people that are armed to respond. So making a gun-free zone, which attracts people like that, and then saying you need more gun control is kind of a step into insanity.
You know, and just the bigger picture, not just in Nevada, but nationally, you know, a lot of issues are being, you know, polarized, and it's kind of everyone's divided into partisan camps. It used to be there were many Democrats who, you know, were passionate advocates of gun rights. Does that concern you that it seems like guns have become a partisan issue?
Yes, and the reason is because you can't have a purely socialist state when the people are armed. I mean, you can look at what happened in New Zealand, you look at what's happened in Venezuela. The whole purpose of the Second Amendment is to make sure that the American people have control over their government. So if it was just a discussion about gun safety, you can look back at the law that was passed on hunter education that had people attend safety classes to learn how to be safe, and there's hardly any hunter accidents or fatalities at all in the United States. We have asked the mayors of the cities to be able to use the community centers for firearms training and safety. No answer. So they're not looking at education, they're not looking at safety. They don't allow any kind of firearms training in the schools. They don't allow Project Child Safe on any public property, and yet they turn around and say it's the gun's fault. When you come across logic like that, you think, well, maybe they're not really interested in public safety, maybe they're more interested in public control, and that's where our concerns lie.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for watching. Remember, if it involves Nevada politics, we're talking about it right here on Nevada Politics Today. I'll see you next week.